Welcome to People Who Perform, the Real Estate Careers Podcast. Each episode will bring you conversations from business leaders and up-and-coming stars in the commercial real estate industry in Canada. Our guests will share their unique career journeys, passions, and advice on what it takes to be successful in this industry. This podcast is brought to you by Highview Partners, connecting people who perform in Canadian real estate.
Welcome to the Real Estate Careers Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Costello, and today our episode is a little bit different. I'm joined by two guests. First, Rudy Uhl, a research analyst at CBRE in Vancouver. Rudy brings an economics background from the University of Bonn in Germany to one of the world's leading commercial real estate platforms. While Rudy is early in his real estate career, he's already contributing through the research and insights that help support CBRE's brokerage teams. Last summer, Rudy also took on a very different challenge, cycling across Canada and attempting to run an ultramarathon in every province, raising more than $60,000 for the Canadian Mental Health Association's BC chapter. Also joining us is Maria Weaver, Director of Suicide Prevention and Life Promotion with CMHA-BC. Maria works closely with communities and organizations across the province to support mental health initiatives and suicide prevention efforts. So in today's conversation, we'll start by learning more about Rudy's role and his journey into real estate. And then we'll talk about his cross-Canada ride last year and what motivated him. From there, we'll broaden the conversation with Maria to discuss mental health in today's environment. So Rudy and Maria, thank you for both joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much, Richard.
All right, Rudy. So let's start with you and your role. What does being a research analyst at CBRE look like in the day-to-day? And how does your work get used by the brokerage teams?
The nice thing about my role is that it's every day kind of is different. So some days I'll be working on reports. We just had our quarterly stats, so just had to come out with a Q1 report. There's a bunch of ad hoc requests from the brokerage teams, and then we also have a pretty in-depth database, so we're constantly updating that to make sure we have the most up-to-date data. So it's a lot of different things going on day to day.
And do you support any particular team, or is it fairly general?
It's fairly general. I'm focused more on the industrial asset class, but I also sometimes hop over and help out with other requests, say if a coworker's away or something, or, if it's very busy.
And how long have you been there?
I have been there for almost 3 years, 3 years in September.
All right. Awesome. Yeah. Well, I guess where do you see research having the most impact in your world right now?
Yeah, I think right now research is quite important. It's a bit of a challenging market right now, and with a lot of uncertainty, with everything going on with the U.S. and tariffs, just research is just helping decision makers navigate all this uncertainty. And I think it's very important to have the most up-to-date and in-depth research as much as possible, to have as much information as possible.
So as someone early in your career, what have you found most interesting or perhaps surprising about the industry so far? Yeah,
just coming from an economics background, what I find really interesting is how interconnected the real estate market is with the economy, and how much you can just kind of get a pulse on the local economy just by how the real estate market's doing. So that's kind of what I find most interesting.
A popular topic or question that seems to come up these days is AI. How is it being used by research teams today, and where are you seeing it add real value in your role?
Yeah, I'm seeing it help me a lot with Excel spreadsheets, complex spreadsheets, helping me create functions, with also data collaboration with other brokerages, and then a bit with just helping write reports and stuff. And I know in our firm at CB, we're trying to expand our AI usage. And I know a lot of different brokerage teams are starting to implement AI agents to help with their workflows. So I think it's still a bit early on, but I think it's only going to be implemented and used more as we kind of grasp it a bit more.
Your job's safe for now though, Rudy.
Yeah, hopefully.
All right. Well, thanks for that. Just nice to get a bit of info on what you get up to. But let's shift gears, pun intended, cycling across Canada and running an ultra in every province. That's a big undertaking. So where did the idea come from?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly where the idea came from. I got into cycling around COVID, and I really started to love cycling from then. And then at some point, it just kind of popped in my head to bike across the country. This was also around a time when I struggled with my own mental health, and I knew others struggling with their mental health. So I thought, why don't I do it for a good cause? And then I had a friend and a former teammate who had biked across Canada raising funds for something else. So I thought, I don't want to be a copycat and just kind of do the same. And that's when I thought, how can I kind of one up them? My competitiveness came out. And I thought, originally it was just, why not run a marathon in every province? And I thought, if I'm doing a marathon, why not just do an ultra marathon? And so that's kind of just how it kind of spiraled into what it became.
Maria, has the thought ever just popped into your head about riding across Canada?
You know what, Richard? I can confidently say that has never crossed my mind, but I am very impressed by those for whom it does.
So, Rudy, had you done anything remotely like this before, or was this like a huge step into the unknown?
This was a huge step into the unknown. Never done something like that before. I had run a couple ultra marathons in the past, nothing too crazy. And I had done one bike bikepacking trip during COVID. It was on my dad's old road bike. I didn't really know what I was doing. It was really ragtag, but I got through it, and I kind of started to fall in love with the idea of bikepacking. And then so I just had this idea, and I thought, you know what, I'll figure it out along the way.
How did you go about preparing? From perhaps having the idea, what was the time frame?
Yeah, I'd say the idea, the seed was planted years ago, and then it just kind of was always there. And then finally I was like, okay, I want to do this. So the timing, the planning, it took maybe about a year to prepare for. I did a lot of research online. Thankfully, there's a lot of resources of people who've biked across Canada. So there's a lot of maps to check out, but I had to do a lot of creating my own map, kind of route, doing a lot of Google Street View to check the shoulders of different routes to see which one looked the best or the safest, and then also acquiring all the gear and everything I needed to, because a lot of camping along the way. So yeah.
And did you have accommodations booked ahead of time? Were you planning to camp at all?
I had no accommodations booked ahead of time. I think the only two things I booked ahead of time was the ferry to St. John's, to Newfoundland and Labrador, and then the flight home, because I had to be back for a wedding. So other than that, I mainly planned to camp. I do have friends and family scattered across the country, so I was thankfully enough, I had some people to stay with. And then I also found online that there's a website for bike packing, and random people will host you and give you a place to sleep, maybe a warm shower or a meal. But so I got to meet a bunch of different strangers and have some very cool experiences.
Yeah, that's awesome. What was your sort of plan for nutrition on the rides?
Yeah, I worked with a nutritionist. That was the only coach I worked with for my training. And so we kind of had a rough idea of how often I should be eating, not necessarily a calorie count, but just try to consume as much as I could. And I followed that for about the first week, but I found I was consuming, there's not a lot of places to stop along the way. So it was a lot of gas station stops, a lot of candy being eaten. And I'm not really a sweets kind of guy. So I was getting a lot of canker sores. And so my mouth was chewed up, so I couldn't eat the candy. So I just kind of tossed my nutrition plan out the window a week in. And then I would have a really big breakfast at Tim's in the morning, a lunch maybe at Subway, and then try to find a local place to eat at night and try to get my calories in.
Yeah, just like a belly full of Twinkies.
Yeah, I would always be eating some kind of candy, but then I had to try to manage that. But I think I was down 15 pounds at one point.
Yeah, you should have been sponsored by Tim Hortons. What was your breakfast routine?
Yeah, my breakfast routine, I think it's pretty normal, but people have told me it's a bit excessive. It was about 3 plain bagels toasted with butter, a sausage farmer's wrap, and then maybe a muffin or a donut or two.
I mean, excessive, like if you're going to work after that. But I mean, if you're planning on riding for the rest of the day, I think it's probably okay. Well, you made it, first of all, but hit us with some stats.
Yeah, so I did, it took me about 46 days of riding. I started in Vancouver and finished in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, so coast to coast. I covered about 6,524 kilometers, and I climbed about 49,876 meters on my bike. These are all kind of estimates. I was using an old phone on Strava, so it's not the most accurate. So those numbers might even be more. And then I did about 550 kilometers run/walked. And then I was averaging about 142 kilometers on the bike every day.
Wow, that's unreal. Do you remember your biggest day?
The longest day, like kilometers wise, I was just under 200 kilometers, and I was upset that I didn't make it to 200 kilometers, but my phone was kind of bugging out and Strava was undercounting me. So I had a long day. And so I was like, I'll cut it off at 192, whatever. And then the actual longest day cycling, I think I was on the bike for about 9.5 hours. And it was an extremely long day of headwinds. There was a lot of long days, but it's funny enough, near the end of the trip, I actually started to miss the long days and was kind of sad that I was shortening up.
And looking back, were there any standout moments on the road that kind of stay with you?
Yeah, I have tons of memories and cool experiences, but if I was to choose one, probably the funniest one that I always tell people is that I experienced true maritime hospitality. I biked into New Brunswick, into a town in New Brunswick, super late, had some delays throughout the day, and I didn't have anywhere to stay, and I was just going to camp near an arena, just in a field. And I was at a Tim Hortons trying to grab some bagels for the morning, and a random guy was on his bike, checked out my bike, came to the Tim Hortons, started speaking to me in French. My French is terrible, so we had a little back and forth. He switched to English, and he just said, you looking for a place to stay? And I was like, yeah, I have nowhere to stay. And he said, I have a hearing clinic right beside here if you want to just crash on the floor in there and have a shower. So I stayed there for the night, and I just thought, what are the chances that, just meet a random person, he offers me to stay, free place to stay.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
And what about perhaps the most challenging stretch physically or mentally? You mentioned that the headwind, but were there any other kind of moments?
Oh yeah, there was tons of moments where it was difficult. I always kind of joke that there's no easy parts of the ride or the running, but I'd say maybe the most mentally challenging was either the prairies, but probably Ontario. I experienced a lot of headwind, and right as I entered Ontario, I started having some issues with my bike, whereas the shifting was kind of messed up. So I didn't have my middle gears. I only had my lowest gears, or my easiest gears. So hardest or easiest gears. And it was a lot of up and down hills with headwinds. And the worst part though was I was getting swarmed by horseflies, like just massive amounts of horseflies. And I always joke that they're pretty smart. They would draft off me when I was going down a hill. And then once I slowed down and went up a hill, they'd start swarming for my face. And so I'd have one hand on my handlebars, one hand swiping these bugs away from my face while like trying not to get hit by cars and just, kind of cursing these bugs. And at one point I thought I could outrun them. I went as hard as I could for 20 minutes. To no avail. And I Googled it that night, and I think they can fly about 120 to 140 kilometers an hour. So I realized there's nothing I can do.
Goodness me. Let's talk about how your perspective changed. So you're starting out this trip. Curious what time of year that was, and just maybe, how your thoughts sort of evolved during this journey.
Yeah, I started May 31st here in Vancouver. I finished August 15th in St. John's. And my perspective definitely changed throughout throughout the ride. I was definitely very nervous at the start. I had told so many people about this. I'd got some sponsorship. I was just very afraid of failing, not being able to complete it in my eyes, even though that's not necessarily a failure. But as I started each day, the next day, I would build more and more confidence and realize oh, my body can do this. I was banging out, as I said, almost 150 kilometers on average per day. I'd run a 50-kilometer ultramarathon, and then 2 days later, I'd bike over 100 kilometers, and my legs would be tired, but my body just kind of adapted and knew what it was getting itself into. So yeah, it was very cool to see my confidence build each day, and then also just gaining a perspective of truly how beautiful our country is and how lucky we are, and personally how lucky I am to be able to call this country home and just see so many different landscapes.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's amazing. During those long stretches, obviously it's once you perhaps leave the mountains behind you, there's a lot of flat ground. What helped you stay focused?
This is probably one of the things that also people think is the craziest. During this whole ride, I didn't listen to music or anything. I had no headphones in, so it was just me and my thoughts the whole way through. And so for those long stretches, it was a lot of just me and myself. But I'd say what got me through, I would sing to myself a lot. I would think a bit about why I'm doing it, but mainly just try to push through. And I had a half an hour timer on my watch to kind of remind me to drink water. So I would always know half an hour. Okay, I could kind of chunk out. I'd move maybe roughly, if I was lucky, 20 kilometers an hour. So I'd roughly know how far I'd go. So I started trying to think of it. I come from a football background. So I'd kind of think about it okay, one quarter is done. Second quarter is done. Get into the fourth quarter. Maybe you have to go into overtime, but just slowly chunk it out and not just think I got 7 hours to go. How can I manage this?
Yeah. Just the little games you can play with yourself.
Yeah. And then one other thing I'd say is I was very happy I was alone because I found out that I'm kind of tone deaf. So my singing was not good at all, but thankfully I had no one there to complain about it.
Well, won't ask you for a rendition.
Thank you.
So you had some really strong support from across the real estate industry in Vancouver. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about who helped you and what that meant to you while you were out on the road.
Yeah, so my main sponsors were CBRE, my work, Peterson Developments and Peterson BC, and BFL Canada, which is insurance. And yeah, their support couldn't have been enough. They were checking in on me during my rides. People ask if I needed anything, just reposting everything. And it truly meant a lot just to know that I had this support in the industry.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of how I found out about your ride. I must have seen some posts maybe from Peterson resharing your journey. And I definitely put a note on my desk to follow up with you once you were done. I think I might have even reached out while you were on the ride. But yeah, amazing support and congratulations again. It's incredible. So like to maybe turn now to the why behind this journey and again, just to say you raised over $60,000 for CMHA-BC. But yeah, you chose to support mental health through this. Perhaps if you're comfortable, Rudy, can you share more about your motivation behind this, sort of the why this cause is important to you?
Yeah, I'm happy to elaborate more on it. I try to be open about this as much as possible because I think it's so important with mental health to try to destigmatize it and by talking about it. So what motivated me to do this endeavor was partly my own struggles with mental health. And then unfortunately, during that time when I was struggling with my own mental health, it was around COVID. I was doing my master's abroad in Germany. So I was very, very much struggling with all that stress. Some friends and former teammates of mine, unfortunately, took their own lives. And then the summer before I did this ride, one of my good friends also attempted to take his own life. So that really motivated me to see how much people were struggling to just try to do something about it. And for some reason I chose this endeavor, which is a bit tough, but I think it was a great way to kind of open up this conversation about mental health.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that, Rudy. Maria, good time to bring you into the conversation. Yeah, perhaps would you mind maybe introducing yourself and the role that you perform at CMHA-BC would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just kind of want to start out by saying thank you, Rudy, for being so vulnerable and honest about your why and sharing kind of the realness of the mental health conversations that you've been having. I'm Maria Weaver. I work for the Canadian Mental Health Association's BC division. So we were the very gracious recipients of the funds that Rudy raised. And I specifically work in the role of Director for Suicide Prevention and Life Promotion. So I oversee a team whose focus really is around kind of preventing suicides and promoting life in our province here through a variety of different kind of programs and educational offerings that we are able to bring to community.
Okay, thank you. And listening to Rudy's experience and his honesty in sharing it, I mean, it really highlights just how important it is to have these conversations and to help kind of break the stigma around talking about mental health and particularly suicide, which feels just really heavy and a tough conversation to get into. So I understand men are far more likely to die by suicide, but what can you share? What does this look like in society? Perhaps, and why is that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good flag, Richard. You're absolutely right that men are a population that when we think about who is kind of disproportionately impacted by suicide, that's a group that really comes up. And so when we think about populations that are affected by suicide disproportionately, usually what that means is there's some kind of either environmental or societal factor that population may be faced with. And so I think, and I've heard you two speak to this in the conversations we've had over the last few weeks, just some of the pressures put on men around, even now that we've moved into kind of a society where, division of tasks in the home is very different for some communities. There is still kind of a burden, I think a lot of men feel around being kind of a sole provider or having to kind of be strong in ways that, don't necessarily encourage emotional sharing or connection in ways that are kind of supportive to mental health. So I think those conversations and encouraging men through activities like what Rudy's done to kind of connect with others and to be able to share openly is so important to really help to prevent, someone from getting to that place where suicide starts to feel like an option.
And Maria, I'm guilty of reading the news on a daily basis. That there's so much, negativity, uncertainty around right now. As an organization, are you seeing that show up in people's mental health in a different way than before? What's standing out to you at this point in time?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I unfortunately am also guilty of reading the news quite regularly. And I think a woman I work with often uses this term polycrises. There's so many things going on in our world right now that, it is hard sometimes to stay hopeful and feel connected when you're faced with so many kind of tragic stories. And I think people feel that for sure. People feel, this sense of, uncertainty about what does the future of our world look like? And, what does that look like for my family, for myself, for my communities, all of these pieces. And I think we're seeing that in those ways. What I'm also seeing though, so that's, I would say, the kind of less hopeful thing I'm seeing. What's interesting though, is we're also seeing more people starting to actually have these conversations, which I will say has been a really hopeful outcome of kind of the amount that tragedy is striking and these conversations are coming up. I have seen more willingness from the folks we work with to actually engage in some really meaningful and important conversations around mental health.
I guess as it relates to the real estate industry, and this applies, across all different parts of the economy as well. We're in and globally too, but Canada and BC in particular, there's a lot of job losses happening. People are experiencing job losses or are finding themselves out of work and having longer stretches between roles. I think it's not always something people feel comfortable kind of talking about. In my role as a recruiter, I will connect with a lot of people that are finding themselves in this kind of situation. They might have been let go from their role, their company's downsizing, or projects are getting stalled. And those opportunities that were perhaps readily available for several years are not there right now in many cases. And it's unclear like when they'll start to come back. And I think this is, it's really challenging for a lot of people. I mean, how, maybe Maria, the question in terms of being out of work or having like some job insecurity, like how does that affect people's mental health and other things that we should be more aware of in ourselves or others?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, Richard. And thanks for sharing like the way that that's really kind of showing up in your own industry. I think loss of any form is often a very common theme we see underlying people's mental health journeys. So whether that's kind of loss of relationships, loss of identity, all of these pieces. But I think job loss is huge, right? Because it can come with multiple losses there. There's the loss of structure potentially of having somewhere you're going every day, loss of identity. Like I think for many of us who care a lot about the work we do, like that's a big change to suddenly be like, my gosh, that was a big part of who I was. And, who am I now? Where do I look? And of course, the financial impacts that can bring as well can be incredibly stressful. And so I think it's a huge contributing factor for folks who are struggling. If you're not able to sustain yourself or to find work, I can only imagine what that feels like to, be in that situation where not only are you looking for these things, the opportunities are more limited is what I'm hearing you share. In terms of what we should kind of be more aware of, I think the biggest thing that we often say is like, we do a lot of education out in the community around noticing signs of struggle in one another. And we get questions like, oh, do I have to be a counselor or a social worker to be able to help? And one of our big key messages is like, we really don't have to be mental health experts to be able to kind of notice things in ourselves and in others, and to encourage folks to connect to resources for support. And I would say the biggest thing we're really looking for, especially when it's with people we know well, is change, right? So what are we noticing in, if you have a colleague, for example, who all of a sudden, they're not speaking up in meetings when they used to be really engaged, they're not showing up to, say you have team lunches or something, they're not attending anymore, they're more withdrawn, like all of those pieces. Those are clues that there might be something going on, right? And one of the best ways we can start that conversation is just to say what you've seen, hey, John, I've noticed that, you've been a lot quieter than usual. You've been withdrawn. Like, what's going on for you? Like, how have you been? And that can really kind of show not only that we kind of care and that we've noticed, but it also helps that person feel seen and make them more likely to kind of be willing to open up. And now that's not to say we have to kind of step into the role of a therapist by any means, but that's when we can kind of point folks in the direction of resources, which I know we can talk about later on the podcast today. Yeah.
And I guess, thank you for that. That's really helpful. And I guess that example there you described is someone that has a bit of a community from the work sense, like they are coming to a workplace and people can identify that. But when people are out of work, all of a sudden those folks that are, have the opportunity to notice that change, you're not seeing them anymore. And so, and I think that's where it can be super difficult. Then you are at home, you're online, obviously applying for jobs. And I guess it's maybe just a message for anyone that's knows someone that they used to work with that's out of work. It's perhaps just a good reminder as well to just check in and see how they're doing, right? Because sometimes they can be forgotten about.
Yeah. And that's such a good reminder, Richard, that like even in itself, that event of the change in job status can be the change that we've noticed in someone. We find out our buddy's just lost his job. That can be what we say as something we've noticed, hey man, I know you just got laid off. Like, how's that been? How are you feeling about that? Like, how have your last few weeks been? So I think that's a beautiful reminder to check in with the people around us, loved ones, friends, former colleagues, especially if we know if something like that has happened for them.
Yeah. Rudy, during your ride, I'm curious, like, did you find like once you'd shared with them like your why, were people like willing to open up and have some chats? Like what did you find?
Oh yeah, like I had great conversations with many people across the country. Once I found out what I was doing, my ride for and everything, everybody is impacted by mental health, either directly or indirectly, and everybody who I talked to had a story. And one thing that I learned during the ride and also a bit before this is just the power of vulnerability. And that's why I try to be as vulnerable as possible and open as possible. But I found vulnerability just leads to deeper connections. But it's also kind of something I've struggled with, especially being a man. A lot of times, like growing up, especially, you kind of think sometimes vulnerability is a weakness, but it's a strength, and it just brings you closer together with loved ones.
Yeah, no. Excellent. Thank you. Maybe just turning to a few more like practical, constructive takeaways. So Maria, like what are some simple things that we can do to support our own mental health?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think, it'll vary person to person. And I think that's something I wish I knew earlier in my life, is that what works for some people might not work for you. And so my biggest encourager for folks is to find the things that bring you joy or that bring you hope or connection in your life. Is it, for some folks that might be journaling, it might be physical activity, it might be joining a club or a project or a group. It could be seeking formalized support like counseling or accessing, if you are employed and you have, for example, like an employee family assistance program, like those types of pieces. And so I really always encourage, like, there's lots of different options. There's things we can do kind of in that more formal sense, like counseling, all of those pieces. There's also some of those more informal pieces, right? What are the things in your life that bring you hope, that bring you connection, that bring you joy? And I would honestly encourage anyone that's listening to maybe just take, it feels a bit cheesy sometimes, but it can be nice to just take a couple minutes out of your day and think, what are those things for me? Like, what are the things that actually bring me a sense of hope, a sense of connection? And who are the professionals and the services I can turn to when I'm really in need of support?
What are your things, Maria?
That's a very good question. I personally, I love being outside. I'm not a Rudy in my outdoorsing, so I'm not out here cycling many, many miles. But I love hiking. So I'm a big hiker. I live in Victoria, BC. So I'm very, very lucky to have that easy access to the outdoors. While I am outgoing in many ways, I'm also quite introverted. And so sometimes what self-care or taking care of my mental health looks like is actually taking an evening where I'm going to say, you know what, I'm actually just going to stay home and watch TV and not talk to a single human being for the next couple hours. So for me, that can also be supportive. I do see a counselor. Someone once actually told me to treat counseling like speed dating, which I thought was quite funny. I was having a hard time finding a counselor that worked for me. And I had a friend who said, Maria, just book a bunch of, these free phone calls they do with you where you get like a 5-10 minute session, and then treat it like you're choosing them so much as they're choosing you. Pick the one you like the best. And I found someone who I absolutely love. So I highly recommend, if you're someone who's like, I'm having a heck of a time finding someone I like, go through those little phone calls. Okay. It'll pay off in spades in the end.
Yeah. No, well, thanks for sharing that. What about workplaces? Like, let's say Rudy works for a large, they're a large brokerage firm, but it could be a developer, it could be a big property management company. What could these companies do better to support their employees? What have you seen?
Yeah, that's a really great question and really topical as well. So many folks may already be aware, but folks who maybe aren't kind of dialed into the WorkSafe BC world. In British Columbia, we are actually on the brink of having psychological health and safety regulations that mirror the regulations employers currently have to meet for physical health and safety. So what's quite exciting, I think, is that soon this will actually not even be kind of an optional add-on for employers. Employers will have a mandate to be able to to protect the psychological health and safety or the mental wellness of their employees. So there's lots of things that workplaces can do. I would highly recommend, so we run a free resource site through CMHA-BC called People Working Well. So if you just Google People Working Well, you can come up to our webpage. There's all sorts of resources on there about things like, psychological healthy and safe leadership. So ways, if you're an employer, for example, what are the ways you can kind of be clear with your team, be transparent, good communication. We talk about ways you can kind of build in support systems. Are there other potentially benefits you can offer your employees? Are there ways you can structure shifts differently? We talk a lot, and I'll caveat this, I'm not a legal professional, but we do talk about accommodations. So if somebody has a diagnosable mental illness in British Columbia, you as an employer may have a duty to accommodate. So potentially making changes to what their work looks like with, collaboration and consent to be able to accommodate supporting them in the work world. So there's lots of great information out there. Highly recommend folks kind of start to dip their toe in that area and to have that as a conversation with their team as well. Like a lot of the time, especially for folks who are kind of working frontline or working with the public or really doing the brunt of the work, they'll have some good ideas about what, creating support in the workplace can look like. So really encourage leaders to start to engage in those conversations with their teams as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Rudy, question for you. What have you learned about resilience from your experience?
Oh, great question. I think I've learned a lot in the sense that you can do so much if you put your mind to it. I needed a tremendous amount of resilience to keep pushing myself every day. A lot of times I thought about wanting to quit the bike ride, not wanting to go, but I just keep pushing forward. But I also learned that, as much as you can push forward, it's also strong to be able to reach out for help. Sometimes you don't need to just do it all by yourself. And reaching out for some support is actually a quite strong thing in itself.
And how would you say this journey has changed how you think about your career and perhaps priorities?
Yeah, it's definitely changed my thoughts a bit about my priorities. I've realized just how much, kind of like Maria, like getting outdoors is so important to me, and spending all that time outdoors on the bike, it just really reinforced how much more I need to get out in nature, especially when I don't want to. Sometimes I want to be lazy and sit indoors. Sometimes I need that, but a lot of times I just need to get out there because it does help my mental health so much just to get out and be surrounded by some natures and some trees.
Yeah, no, awesome. We're hoping to release this episode during Mental Health Week in Canada, first week in May. Maria, could you maybe share the importance of initiatives like Mental Health Week?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's such an important way to kind of remind ourselves that these conversations aren't going away, right? Like the fact that Mental Health Week takes place annually is such a good reminder of the importance of, it's almost like a check-in point. Like, are we still having these conversations? What is this looking like? How can we continue to kind of raise that awareness and combat stigma or any kind of unfair or negative attitudes we might have around mental illness or mental health challenges? So I think it's a really important opportunity for folks to really come together and to demonstrate, that openness to conversation and that vulnerability that Rudy shared so beautifully about earlier.
And Rudy, from your perspective, like why do you think conversations like this one matter, especially within like the real estate industry?
I think it's very important. Again, like this, mental health is a very important thing. It's not going away. Everyone deals with it. And especially in commercial real estate, where it's such a cyclical industry, where the highs are great, but the lows are really low. And it definitely affects people's mental health. I've seen it firsthand. And so I think these conversations are just important, just again, to kind of break the stigma and for people to know that it's okay to not be okay and to be struggling. You're not alone, and there are many resources available.
Maria, I guess final thing from you in terms of how you're feeling about progress made in this area of like tackling stigma and having these conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think honestly, in the time that I've been in this field, I've seen some really great progress towards like much more openness around conversations about mental health. Surely, I think we still have a ways to go. And I know for sure there are some industries, some areas where stigma still exists. But we do at CMHA-BC, we do a lot of training and support for workplaces around kind of building employee resilience, workplace mental health, psych health and safety, all of these pieces. And what we've seen that's so cool is that we've started, when I started, I would say a lot of our clientele was social services. So folks who are actually offering mental health services and who were kind of bought into this idea that mental health is important. But in my time in the role, we've done, we had a large hotel chain come to us and say, we want to do some work around equipping our employees with more skills to have these conversations. We did a suicide prevention training actually for a fitness facility that did fitness programming for youth, who recognized, youth are disclosing about their mental health, about suicide to our fitness instructors. And we want to actually skill these folks up to kind of have the basics of those conversations. And I just think seeing, these non-traditional industries in the sense that they're not, mental health providers, but that openness that's been developing around, these things are happening in our workplace, and it's important that we have those skills and that we're supporting our staff to feel empowered to look after their own wellness and also the wellness of the people that we work alongside or serve. I think it's honestly really inspiring.
Yeah. Well, a good chance to give our event a plug then. So hopefully most listeners will know about the Real Estate Grind for mental health. But we're doing the event again. It's the 6th year that we've hosted this. So I think it's first Thursday in July. And last year we had about 250 people from the real estate industry in kind of the Lower Mainland do the grouse grind, and then we have a social event at the top, super relaxed. And there was some amazing fundraising efforts by companies and by people. We raised over $50,000 for CMHA-BC last year. So really hoping that we could get close to that number again. And Rudy, I'm hoping you're going to make it out this year as well.
I would love to. I was just going to ask a follow-up for any listeners. How would you sign up or be able to be a part of this?
We're working on, we've got a new logo coming out for the event this year. I thought it was kind of high time we had
rebrand.
A good slick brand. So once that's all sorted, we'll have the website. So it's all like a microsite from CMHA-BC, so that everybody that signs up, there's no kind of admin fees associated with this. It's like every dollar that you put to sign up goes directly to CMHA-BC, and you can, I think it's $60, but you can, donate more and create your own little fundraising page. So I'll be sharing that. Like LinkedIn's probably the place to go to see it, and anyone that did it last year will get a note about that as well. So keep an eye on the LinkedIn's. But one little callback for you, Rudy, would you do this again? Would you cycle across the country, or have you got any other big plans in store?
No big plans in store, not for this year. Maybe next year I'll do something kind of crazy. I want to do like a 24-hour plus running race. But would I cycle across the country? I definitely would. I don't know if I'd run an ultramarathon along the way, though.
No, I don't blame you. But look forward to sort of hearing what you have in store in the future, and thank you very much for sharing your the why and the journey. Tremendous effort, massive impact, and Maria, it was really nice to kind of meet you through this process, and thanks for sharing all of that good info as well. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having us, Richard. I really appreciate it. And thank you both on behalf of CMHA. Like, the work you're doing is truly making a difference. And we're just so grateful to be able to work with you.
Thank you for listening to People Who Perform, the Real Estate Careers podcast brought to you by Highview Partners, a talent search and recruitment firm focused exclusively on Canadian real estate. If your real estate team is looking to find the best next hire, or if you're ready to make the best next move in your career, then reach out to Highview Partners today. Follow us on LinkedIn and visit us at highviewpartners.ca.